So welcome everyone to this interview presented to you by Vedhik AI Schools Center of Excellence in collaboration with IICT GmbH, Germany. So today we have with us two eminent personalities. One is Mr. Fabian, he is the Technical Director of IICT Germany. And we have with us Mr. Dominic, who is the Senior Software Architect at IICT Germany. So welcome both of you.
Thanks.
I hope you're doing great here. So we have some questions regarding the course that we will be providing the students, especially on 5G and IoT. So let's start by understanding in layman terms what you mean by 5G and IoT. So it's an open question, like anyone can pitch it.
Yeah, so probably all of you or everybody also you know 5G, right? You connect your phone with that, you get access to the internet. But of course, 5G is also much more than that. I mean, it's the fifth generation of mobile communication standard, and it's a standard that is globally available. That means if you travel to the US, if you travel to Germany, you can use it there in the same way you use it here, for example. But it's not only about phone connectivity or fast speed. It's also about enabling industries for new use cases and scenarios. For example, you can think of a robotic control system, which requires very low latencies, which is not possible with other technologies that easily. And one special thing that I would also say about 5G is that it's very flexible and versatile, so you can tackle a lot of different use cases, which is not possible with other technologies that easily.
Yes. So 5G is a term that is very much familiar to the people over here. So what does the term IoT actually mean?
Yeah, IoT itself stands for Internet of Things, and it's basically about connecting everything, even smallest devices. If you think 10 years back, we didn't have smartwatches or things like that. Now we see sensors everywhere, also even in agriculture. So it really means integrating this kind of wireless connectivity that you can communicate over long ranges, even with smallest devices, and then enabling new services, for example, such as condition monitoring and showing that in a cloud system. All that is part of IoT, but IoT itself is really a huge field which covers multiple different domains.
Wonderful, thank you. So we'll move on to the next question. So why is 5G considered to be a game changer in today's world, and how does it impact the industries and everyday life?
Yeah, especially with regards to industry, there have been additions to the standard. So 5G is standardized by the 3GPP. That's the global organization who writes the specification. And starting with 5G, they have enabled us to run even real-time Ethernet protocols over 5G. And this is very interesting for the industry because now they can try to get rid of cables, of cabling, and try to use existing 5G networks. Maybe some of them, in Germany, for example, some of them already have a private 5G network, which is currently sitting there just for multimedia, for voice calls. But obviously, they're interested in using that one for their machines, for their industrial automation as well. And with 5G, this is part of the standard, so this can be enabled. Yes.
Okay, and that is going to have a lot of impact in everyday life with the devices that we use in everyday, like the mobile phones.
For these ones, I think most of you will notice. Yeah, you have better speeds, you have more bandwidth. But for industry, this is they care more about latency, as Fabian already mentioned. Yeah.
But in the end, of course, that also impacts our life because the processes can be made more easily, and new products can be maybe more easily created. Let's say it like that.
So the entire process becomes faster with 5G, if I'm not wrong.
It can become faster, but also just new possibilities can be created that have not been that easily possible before.
Okay. So moving on to the next question that we have, what are some real-world examples of IoT in action that people actually use in their everyday life without realizing it?
Yeah, I can maybe start with one. I think one prominent one that I'm also using here is, for example, a smartwatch. So smartwatch includes a couple of small sensors, right? It's a very small device. It's has long battery lifetime. It tracks the data and it actually sends it in the end to some kind of cloud where it's then processed. That is already one example of IoT, which has all the different components of a typical IoT component, meaning there is a sensor, there is some kind of transmission, might be wirelessly, and I have some kind of cloud where I can analyze all these different data points remotely wherever I am. So I have an app where I can also connect to that. And this is one typical example that I would say you probably don't notice it, but it's IoT actually in your everyday life.
Okay. What about the cars now? It's becoming more connected these days. So, like, will that also fall under this IoT itself? Like, the cars are becoming more smarter every day. They have this ADAS sensors and all. Like, will that also fall under this, or is it a different technology altogether?
I would say this is rather, because in a car you have much more space, right? So IoT is usually small devices.
Okay, so like headphones, like, does that fall under that? Or?
But yeah, but I would also say that, for example, people have now washing machines that are smart, right?
Yeah.
And by smart, at least they have an app where you can show, okay, what is the progress, or you can start it remotely.
Okay.
So yes. I would also categorize this under IoT.
Okay, so the wireless home devices that you have. The
IoT
and,
Alexa,
you have Alexa,
IoT, but yeah, IoT smart home. I think there's I don't think there's a sharp distinction there necessarily. Yeah, so one enables the other, I would say.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, can you just explain how 5G and IoT work together to make devices smarter and more efficient? How does what happen?
Yeah, maybe first of all, one has to say that why do we even need still the other technologies? Why do we even need IoT if we have 5G? So IoT use cases similar to what I explained before, for example, with the smartwatch, they send typically only small amount of data in very long periods, let's say. With 5G, typically, even though it's not only about big data amounts, typically the use cases there slightly a bit different. So these two technologies, they are complementary to each other, or they need each other also to really fulfill all the kind of use cases that we have. Mm-hmm. So for example, if we take an IoT scenario such as a smart agriculture scenario, where we would probably need a very long range, a long battery lifetime, maybe 5G itself might not be the best first technology to use, but it might somewhere in the process of transmitting the data to the cloud, it might be very useful. For example, an IoT sensor could send the data to a gateway, so-called gateway, and the gateway itself could then communicate with a mobile base station, for example, so with 5G itself. So they two can work clearly together to bridge these kind of low power devices and this kind of global connectivity that we get also with 5G together to then really create a whole connected world.
Okay. So everything at your fingertips, basically. If I put it in simpler terms, like, is it okay if I say, like, you can access anything, anywhere at a faster rate at your fingertips if we connect 5G and IoT from Ultron? I
think that's the overall goal, yes. And how to do that securely, also securely. That's also important, right? Yes. That's for us to find out.
Okay, thank you so much. So, with the rise of smart cities and AI-powered devices, how are 5G and IoT playing a key role in these advancements?
Yeah, 5G or IoT is always an enabler technology, right? So, without IoT or 5G, you would not have a couple of use cases. As I said also before, smart agriculture, for example, or smart city. If you would need to lay cable everywhere, also AI would not help you much there. So these technologies, they really enable you to now also use AI. For example, we transport the data to the cloud, have the AI over there, and these two, they will push each other even more. So that is definitely what we can see with more 5G. Probably there will also happen more AI and vice versa. There will be more applications coming along.
Because you have more data, yeah? You have more sensors wirelessly, and I mean, machine learning AI, you need data to train your model, right? So
one complements the other, kind of. So like in a period of time, like there will be more advancements because there is more interplay between these two technologies. Like I hope if I'm not getting it wrong, just from my understanding, like AI uses 5G because which it is getting smarter because it is able to process more and more data. Am I right or wrong in that?
I mean, AI does not exactly use maybe 5G, but it makes use of the technology because you need to transfer somehow the data from point A to point B.
Okay.
And what AI needs is data, and what 5G can make is transport data from point A to point B, where point B typically is a cloud.
Okay, so it enables the transfer, and yeah, so in a way it helps each other, right?
Exactly, it helps each other.
Yes. Wonderful, thank you. So now moving on to the perspective of students who are actually interested in learning about 5G and IoT. So like many students actually, maybe hearing the term 5G and IoT, they think that the topic is very complex and maybe out of their reach and maybe not for something that they can learn. Is it actually very difficult for students to pick up, or can anyone start learning about this?
Anyone can start learning. Yes, the topic is very big. Yes, but which also means, which is also a good thing, because you have many different
areas that you can
area
explore.
Exactly. You have many different technologies. You need many different skill levels there. But what you need to do is, yes, you need to start somewhere. And then from that starting point, you need to hop to the next, and so on and so on. And then once you're in the general topic, I think then you learn more and more as the time goes on.
Yeah, so you will be able to find your niche once you start.
That's exactly, yes. That's
so
exactly.
It's vast. So people with different interests and different abilities will have a space there. So it is accessible for everyone. I hope that's what you're getting at.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, if you take a course here, then
yes, we have the best people.
This would be a great starting point.
Yeah. So on the same note, are there any kind of prerequisites? So students, do they need to be from a coding background to have a start in this field, or can they be from any background?
There is, I mean, if you know coding, if you know DevOps, like containerization, these technologies, they definitely help with 5G, especially on the core side, because the whole core is usually running as in a containerized environment. But obviously you also have the whole RF side, right? So in 5G terms, this would be the radio access network, RAN, where you also have software, but obviously you also have RF, be it even antenna design is there, right? So this is again a wider range of different technologies. But yes, if you know some basic programming, if you know some basic operating system level skills, Linux would be one example, because most of these technologies run on Linux. The whole containerization world is built on top of Linux. So this is definitely helpful, and as a basic, and this you can learn at home, right? You don't need any fancy hardware for that, but you can start with these things at home on your laptop.
Yeah, like the most important is, of course, that you are curious and also eager to learn. And as Dominic mentioned, the baseline, like coding exercises or Linux basics, you can learn at home. But we also, of course, provide some learning path where you can start from the very basics to get to a level that you can then also use professionally.
Okay, so it is possible, but if you have a background in coding, it will be much more faster. You will have the advantage, if I'm not wrong.
It will be helpful because in the end, most of the 5G topics that you typically work on are related to some kind of software. So if you have the basics of software engineering in general, some coding experience, that will of course help you to understand a couple of things in the 5G much more easy.
Totally makes sense. Thank you so much. So let's say a student wants to learn this. So what would be a path, or what would be the first few steps that you would suggest they take? Let's say they have a basic understanding of coding and they have a basic understanding of how programs work. What would be the next step that you would suggest them? What would be the things that you would want them to learn before they jump into this field?
Yeah, as you outlined, the baseline should definitely be a good knowledge or a first knowledge in some operating system, especially Linux, because this is what also the servers that you would find the core or even the RAN being powered by running on. So a good experience there would definitely be helpful. Coding experience as well, where especially also some languages such as C and C++ are quite helpful, but not required. Especially if you think of an application developer career where you, for example, would want to enable different kind of 5G based use cases, even some Python skills can really advance your understanding and your capabilities to do something with 5G. If you really want to implement a new use case, it's also not a hard requirement to be on a very low level programming exercises itself. And for us itself, it's also always important to keep that hands-on approach in the whole picture, let's say, because this is in the end what you need to do if you want to implement a use case, where we also see that actually working with hardware is an important aspect, even though in the first steps you can really start with all these basic concepts of programming. You can definitely start virtually, or even online. And then for us, the clear path along would be to go training with hardware itself, to then enable you also to work on different projects. I think that is also one of the very important parts, that you should not try to be stuck too much in the theoretical sections, but actually try to do something by yourself, because then you really learn what are the challenges that you are going to face also later in your career.
And also this also is true for the IoT part, right? I think you were talking more about 5G, but for IoT, you can buy cheap devices, like think of a Raspberry Pi, which is for IoT. In IoT terms, it's already pretty high powered, right? But there are other like ESP boards or these kind of things which are even wireless enabled for wireless communication. And if you tinker around with this one at home, then this would be a huge advantage. Yes.
Okay. So thank you so much. So the next question would be, are you aware of the free or affordable resources that's available to students? So that they can start with this learning. So like you said, they need to start with the basics of coding or the operating systems, and then move on to the hands-on approach, right? So for this basic learning, are there any free or affordable resources?
Yes. Most of the software, like compilers, entire languages, standard libraries, all this is available as open source, be it C, be it Python, be it C++. If you have Linux, is also free and open source, right? And if you install Linux, for example, you can install that in a virtual machine, which would enable you to run this on your normal PC. So it will act like you have a computer within your computer. This is completely separate. And if you would install this, you would already have access to most of these tools by default, right? And then you could just start to play around with this. This would be the first step. And even coming to 5G, some of these things are open source, right? Entire 5G core networks are open source. You can look at the code. It's on GitHub. It's there. So this is all there.
Again, this would be a progress. As Dominic said, the basic tools, they are open source and available. Of course, there are also plenty of tutorials there, how to install these components, how to get started with them. Of course, if then you advance more and more, also the topics get a bit more complex, where it would also make sense at some point, of course, to go a bit, get some guidance somewhere, most likely. Of course, the basics can always be covered with some online open source solutions, and then depending on your level, you have to see how much you can actually do by yourself. But there's definitely resources available to get started. Like if you have that resource hunger in you, or that curiosity, let's say, there is a way to start with that.
Of course. So yes, so the things that you need to learn are like mostly it's open source, and the guidance part would be like, does YouTube help? Like that's free, right? So like, will YouTube help that?
On certain tools, yes, definitely. I mean, there is so much of material out there. Maybe you have to there consider what is good quality, what is bad quality, which might be maybe an issue.
Matters, right? Yeah.
Of course. And if you really want to go into 5G, there is actually not so much on the YouTube, for example. The resources are a bit more sparse, where then you're a bit more on your own. And then again, it depends a lot on your level, if you can actually handle that yourself, or if you should get some more guidance.
I mean, I love open source software, but there's definitely no denying that the documentation of sometimes is lacking, right? I mean, I noticed that myself. I rather write code than write documentation, and I think this holds true for most of us software guys. So yes, it can be a bit tricky, and you have for some configuration options you have to look into the code itself to understand it, which might be hard if you're starting from scratch. But for the foundations, for like learning a programming language, learning Python, there are YouTube tutorials available for that one. Yes.
Yeah. So for the very basic, yes, of course, there are a lot of free resources available. But as you move on to the next step, then the resources become like very limited, I guess. Okay. So can students learn without access to high-tech labs? Would they be able to explore these topics without the access to high-tech labs, or would they be able to do it at home, or do they need access to high-tech labs? Like, what is your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. They can get started definitely without high-tech labs. I mean, high-tech labs we see also only in very, let's say, some prime institutions where they spend hundreds, thousands of dollars or euros. But to get started, as also Dominic outlined, there are even software tools simulating these tools that basically do mostly the same, which help you to understand the base concepts and even start developing your own use cases. Where then, in the end, if you buy, for example, let's say some IoT devices, they are quite cheap. Just to get to a level where you can actually do it yourself, of course, that is the challenge over there. And if you want to work with real hardware, even there in COEs, for example, like here we have the fundamental hardware that you can use, also state-of-the-art hardware that is maybe not what you would find in a cell or to cover kilometers of range, but which is suitable for a small room to really get started on some hands-on projects, which is then something that probably you would not take home with you, but rather you go to some specialized centers, for example, to train on these topics.
So it is possible to get started, but then again, you will need help from specialized centers to explore the topic further, isn't it?
Correct. To get started, a good point really to get these open source solutions, get simulation solutions and some guidance to work on them, because they're a bit complex sometimes. And then when it comes to projects itself, also there you can start even with these tools. But when it comes to you really want to give something to the community, maybe you want to implement some smart agricultural system, let's say, of course you cannot have that just in software, because that is just a simulation for you to learn on.
Yes. And guidance definitely helps, because I know how frustrating it can be. You look at a new technology, you don't understand anything at a first glance, right? And it's hard to convince yourself to not give up. And if you have guidance, that is definitely easier, yes. Right? If you can ask a couple of questions or pinpoint and you get some pointers, okay, look over there, you can use this tool and that tool and do it this way, it's easier. This will help you progress faster. That's for sure. Yeah.
That makes sense. So thank you so much. So, moving on to some real world applications and hands-on approach for the students, what are some simple DIY projects that you would suggest for students to, get a better understanding of how IoT works? What about that?
Okay, in software engineering, we have there's this Hello World program, which basically, if you learn a new programming language, the first thing you do is print out on the screen Hello World. And I think the same tool or the same concept for the IoT world would be to blink an LED. I think this is like the Hello World of IoT or of microcontrollers. So this would be the first step. And by doing that, you already get familiar with the development environment. You learn how to put code onto the device, how to flash the device, maybe even how to debug these kind of things. And if you know that one, then then you're already ahead.
So when the audience might hear the term blinking or lighting, they might think that it's very simple, but a lot of work goes behind it.
And you get feedback. You see something, so this is always nice.
So you'll be instant feedback. Does it work or not work? So I guess working on that project itself would be a huge start, I guess. So thank you so much. So for their schools and in their house itself, would they be able to apply what they learn, or is it only possible in a simulated environment?
No, definitely you can also apply that knowledge directly in your home. When Dominic now talked about blinking the LED, of course this can be expanded much more. You can think of some home automation scenario, for example, that you want to implement at home. Maybe you want your TV to be remotely controllable. Maybe that's already a bigger project, or some kind of, you don't have to recreate the Amazon Echo or something like that. But similar projects you can actually implement where even AIoT is used, so artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, where you can actually also deploy, for example, AI on some small chips that could do some similar kind of analysis as you have with Amazon Echo, and it would be your own solution that you could train your own models on. There's really plenty of things that you can do, which is even on small controllers that are not even that expensive. You just have to get to know these basics. And when Dominic talked about blinking an LED, the result, as you say, is small, but the steps that you did before are quite big. And then doing the next project, you will see much more results putting in the same effort.
So you're saying that there are n number of possibilities at home, you just need to think.
Yes. You have to think, You have to be creative, and you have to be interested in it.
Exactly.
Deploying sensors, measuring your power usage, all these kind of things. And then probably you don't have a smart power meter at home. But there are ways, maybe there's you have a display where it's shown what is your current usage. So then you could use some AI model to read the digits, right? Image recognition, these kind of things. So you can think of any possibility. Then you can, once you have the data, well, you can start like a monitoring on your laptop or on a small PC, where you can then furthermore visualize the data. Keyword here would be something like Grafana or something like a dashboard where you visualize different data. And then if you want to use some AI, well, you can train on that data for certain things. Yeah, what do you want?
Sky is the limit.
Exactly.
Okay, wonderful. So just moving on to some challenges, about this technology, or another question basically, like how will 5G change the way we connect and communicate in the next 5 years, or like will 5G be overtaken by any other technology? Do you see such possibilities?
I mean, 5G is going to develop into 6G, let's say, so probably at some point
that would be the next logical step. Yeah.
Would be the next logical step, and of course, this kind of specification, this is rolling out all the time. Like 5G is actually working in different releases, where you can already see we are already halfway through to 6G basically. Where some of the things that are coming in are, for example, also an integration with non-terrestrial networks, so with satellite communication, meaning also especially for some remote areas where you don't have the cell towers on Earth, you could also use, for example, the satellite communication, where you're not depending on some kind of Elon Musk-based network, let's say.
Starlink.
Yeah, Starlink.
Okay.
So these are some of the things that would also change how we would communicate.
Okay, so the next logical step will be 6G, and then again, it will continue to develop, right?
It is already continuing, yes. Release, I think right now release 18 is almost done. So they're working release 19 and already doing research for release 20. So just for you to understand, so release 15 is the first release that was called 5G, basically. Yes. So this is like a ongoing process that's happening all the time.
So like when one thing comes out, like immediately the work for the next starts, isn't it? So it's continuous.
The preparation
it's overlapping
to 6G started already when 5G was introduced to all of us.
So there's always something new to learn in this field. Like it's never redundant, right? Always new explorations, new learnings, new findings. Wow. Okay, so now let's talk a bit about the career opportunities for students. So what industries are currently hiring professionals for 5G and IoT? Or people with those skills. Which industries would be the most apt for students? Like if a student learns more on 5G and IoT.
Yeah, I believe the most obvious one would be probably the telecommunication industry, where of course the telecommunication industry needs people that understand how 5G works, how it's going to be deployed, how do you plan it, but also how do you maintain it or how do you troubleshoot that. So these are all things, of course, that are very much required in telecommunications. But in all other domains, especially, let's say, in manufacturing industry or process automation industry, 5G will also become much more relevant, especially with introduction of private 5G networks, which allow a company basically to own the 5G network themselves, so they have to now operate it. So what was before handled with telecommunication companies is now handled within the company. Okay. This is a complete new demand coming up.
Okay. So it can spread to the other big MNCs later on developing these technologies for themselves, right? Okay. So a lot of opportunities are coming up.
Yes, and I mean you also have the other manufacturers, right, who manufacture the different 5G components. They also need people with maybe even a deeper understanding than the telecommunication providers themselves to develop new solutions there, right? New antenna designs and everything. So
new components, but also even as an application engineer, of course, you want to implement different use cases. There you could really work in all kinds of fields. Even government that would maybe want to roll out some kind of 5G use cases. So if you want to work on the 5G use cases, the skill set is probably also a bit different than when you work at a telecom OEM or something like that, where you would really need to understand just which components are available, how do you integrate those, and how do you work with those to then create some new applications that can be useful. So all these kind of...
So basically, you will have opportunities everywhere, maybe not in the huge numbers, like you said, in the telecommunication field or in that industry, but almost every other industry would have at least a niche group of people working on their own technologies.
And I mean, a lot of the skills you learn, we were already talking about containerization, all these things. I mean, these are transferable to any other field, right? You don't need to containerize your 5G core network. You can also containerize other applications, right? If you have a company, if you have like some database that you want to containerize or run on virtual machines and all these things. So this is even needed for industrial companies, which are after a certain size. You have some services that need to be run
to be automated, and yes. So this would be like the stepping stone to more opportunities later on. But again, the basic thing, like you need to be curious, you need to continue learning, right? That is the message.
And you have to have the practical experience that you work on different projects. I think that is also what we see a lot as an industry demand that people should not just come out of university with some technology knowledge, some theoretical knowledge, but they should actually have some knowledge of how do you do that.
The hands-on approach should be, it is a very necessary part of this learning, I guess. Right?
Exactly.
Yes. Wonderful. So moving on to the next question. How important is networking and internships for students who wish to pursue a career in 5G?
Very important, I would say. I mean, networking is a tool to maybe get internships, right? And the internships, will give you hands-on experience. So this is always the main goal, I would say. Yes.
Will you give some examples of platforms where they would be able to do this, like upcoming workshops or anything like that?
Yeah, maybe also to add to that, of course, in the networking, you can also easily get help and get your first connection into the industry. Mm-hmm. Of course, one popular platform here is also LinkedIn, where you can see also your the typical companies that are around in that domain, where you can already even get some information, or you can get some high-level posts, you get an ideas what is going on. Then, of course, there are also events such as fairs, for example, where you could even get in touch with companies and try to really understand what they are doing, but also build even relationships on such a technical or professional level that could really help you to get some guidance also on different projects itself.
The technology expos, if I'm not wrong, is that what you're getting? Okay. Exactly. So just with these expos, talk to people, understand what's going on, and see if you are interested, and then just learn more about it, right? If I'm not wrong.
Exactly. That is one approach in the world itself, but also in the digital world, let's say there's opportunities like with different forums or even communities over there, for example, where you can get support if you get into Python programming or into 5G. There are different communities around that maintain certain code in GitHub, for example, where you can really also connect to people or developer over there if this is also something that you're interested in.
Okay, so network, get internships, get hands-on approach, learn, and go from there, right? Yeah. So it is very important. Yes. Thank you so much. So, how can students build projects or practical experience to make themselves job ready in this field? Is it through the same method like internships? Is that the only way to do that? Or
it is not the only way. Projects, as we said before, I think projects first could either start from a student's point of perspective, if there's really an interest in a topic that you really want to dive into. Of course, there's maybe university projects which might be a bit limited, or also projects that you could just execute, for example, in a COE, where you just need access to the basic infrastructure, to the infrastructure itself, and then you just need let's say a certain guidance or a nudge into a certain direction that people get an interest and motivation to work in that. And then once this spark is getting over to the student, I think then getting more and more into the project is definitely coming along on the way. Let's say it's in the process.
Okay, so now this is a question I think more relevant to India. Yeah. So there might be students who are from rural areas, and they might not have the exposure like the students who are from the cities, who have access to internet and the resources that we just mentioned. So people from the rural areas tend to be a little more in the dark when it comes to these technologies. So are there any initiatives or opportunities for such students to get into these fields?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, I think the initial onboarding is something that can be easily done with free open source solutions, also with a mix of blended learning courses, for example, where let's say they don't have to come every day for half a year to a center or visit some kind of facility, but where they could come in specific time to really get the hands-on experience. And such kind of a mix of a blended learning approach, I think, makes there a lot of sense. And where they also can get some devices even to their home. Like if you don't need, for example, the private 5G solutions, a lot of solutions around IoT is quite affordable, also to take home to execute certain projects.
And I mean, people in the 80s were learning programming, and there was no internet back then. So and they still managed to learn, right? With books and all these kind of things. Offline material also exists, right? So this is even without having 24/7 internet, I think you could manage to learn the basics.
So I think the key thing here is to just expose them to like the idea that there is something like this. And yes, of course, like you said, through blended learning and through books, they can actually start working, and through many other affordable options, right? So it is possible for like anyone even from a rural area without access to technology, like it is possible for them to learn. The thing is, expose them to the idea that there is something like this. Right?
Yeah, I think oftentimes it also first needs to become clear what is the possibilities and that it is possible. And I think definitely from our perspective, it is definitely possible to learn all these technologies and also get into projects, even though you're not connected in a big city, let's say.
Okay, so that's wonderful. So, like, can students start their own startups or businesses in 5G and IoT? You know, if yes, like, would you be able to give them some suggestions or advice?
The possibility definitely exists. For sure, every student could technically build such a startup, but of course, the market is also can be tough, of course, where you need to be sure that you have the right idea, that you have the right network, and that your business idea is proven. Not only think for yourself in your dark room, but try to also tell the idea to others, to experts in that field. Otherwise, you will quite quickly realize that your idea might not work, and then you spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, and in the end, you get nothing out of that. So I think that is very important that these first steps, even you think it's a great idea, try to always verify your idea and try to get connected. And that's coming back to the networking aspects and to the internship aspects. You might not even know what is already there, which ideas have been already tried by other people. There are many experts that have much more idea about that because they have been in that field for many, many years. So I think this is definitely one step that is a must, that you should really go out with your idea to experts that you also trust, and then definitely try to follow your ideas and your dreams, but also be free to adapt. It can be a dynamic world.
Yeah.
And
yes.
Yeah, then just keep working hard.
And also think about the cost, right? If you do some hardware based, if you have a hardware based idea, you need the expensive equipment.
Yeah.
It's harder to make a startup work with if you need to do that. Instead, if you just purely focus on a purely software based solution, right? Where it's the initial starting cost is much lower there.
So it's much more feasible there. Then from there you could later on move on to the hardware sector. So it is possible. You just need to have the right contacts, the right mentors, and the right attitude to adapt to the situation, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So wonderful. That was a wonderful answer. Thank you so much. So, for all the students, for the advantage of all the students, so we are providing a course on this, right? So would you be able to briefly outline what are the benefits of, to the students if they join for this course, and like how is it, designed, like in very few words, if you could say that.
So the benefit of this course would be that we provide a clear learning path where you really get started with the basic introductions to Linux programming, even though you have those already, but get onboarded into the systems that we are going to use. And we are starting with these virtual solutions and guide you there, but also step by step, since this is such a learning path, we give you more and more independence to in the end also work on projects yourself. So what we aim to achieve to even a beginner, to make them ready to work in the professional world.
Wonderful. And yes, we have the best mentors too, right? For that, yes, you guys are the best in the field. So, then now moving on to the final question. So, what advice would you give young students who are interested about learning 5G and, more about IoT?
Yeah, the most important thing is be curious about things. Be not afraid to try things out. Be not afraid to break things. Be not afraid to make mistakes, because while making mistakes, you sometimes learn more than if everything succeeds on the first try. And don't give up. I think that would be.
I think that's a great summary. Yeah.
So thank you so much. So this was a beautiful interaction. Thank you so much. Even I was able to learn a thing or two. And yes, of course, I think the audience would have found this very, very useful. So again, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for, spending this time and answering these questions. Your expertise, it was, like very much needed for us. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Fabi. Thank you so much, Dominic.
Thanks for having us and for the nice questions also.
Thank you so much. I try. So yes, that would be a quick wrap up of this interview. I hope you guys found this very useful and inspirational. So see you in the next video. Thank you so much.